So thank you for attending. It is absolutely a pleasure that I'm broadcasting this and chatting to you about the World Energy and Meteorology Council's Education Special Interest Group, which is kicking off with vigour today in most respects. So this is all about what we aim to do with the Education SIG, as we're calling it for short, what it would entail, how you could be involved, and any ideas, suggestions, advice that you may have, or any questions that you may like answered. So just to give you just to let you know that you can use the chat function at any time. So you just go to the console, it may be at the top of your screen or the bottom of your screen, and you click on the 3 dots under More, and then you can click the chat box there. And then that will allow you to comment, answer questions, and there'll be an opportunity a couple of times for some feedback and a chance to introduce the attendees. So here is our agenda. I won't read it out word for word because you've seen this when you registered. It would have been at the top of the registration page. So we'll go through these, and we will most certainly be aiming to end this webcast by 4 o'clock local time, 5 o'clock Central European time. So it's UTC +2. So I'm delighted that I have with me 2 of WEMC's directors, so Laurent Deboeuf from EDF and Alberto Rackley, the managing director, who's based here in Norwich, United Kingdom. So I'm quite happy if perhaps Alberto, you first would like to just give a very, very quick overview of WEMC and what we're up to.
Okay, thank you, Kit. And it's very good to see this activity led by you with the SIG education. The World Energy Meteorology Council is looking to engage much more in this topic with the members, and we're here to improve the link between the science community and the energy industry to ensure that the industry uses the latest developments in the science and to achieve the goals that are set by the Paris Agreement and other global agreements of similar challenge. So thanks Kit, and thanks everybody for participating.
Okay, thank you very much, Alberto. And so just to kind of like regather everything here about WEMC, I mean, this is just some graphic I put together. This is based from some information from our partners in the WMO and EDF Energy. So we kind of have this, we kind of like work as this nexus of bringing the energy, climate, and meteorology communities together, and we kind of facilitate all these collaborations. I won't go into too much detail, but a good way to look at it is kind of like we're another facilitating arm of the services that all these sectors provide, and kind of get them to connect and collaborate. Education is a new element to this, which is my role here at WEMC, but you can find out more by visiting wemcouncil.org. We currently have 175 members. We hope that those of you who aren't members here today or listening will join up. It's free, but I will talk about that a bit later. And we have many, many more partners who are involved on the institutional level and on an individual level and academic level. So we're a very well connected agency, and we're growing all the time and having really exciting projects on the go and really exciting connections. So the SIG will be based under the WEMC umbrella and directed by us here at WEMC. So the special interest groups themselves, they are one of the ways that WEMC are trying to promote the energy, climate, and meteorology nexus and collaboration. So by breaking up into what's effectively expert groups, so special interest groups, we have 4 in the past. 2 of them are active at this time. So there's one called Data Exchanges, Access and Standards, which is led by Laurent Deboeuf, who is joining us as well here today. So that's that's ongoing at the moment, and that's kicked off very recently, and is gaining lots of ground. This Education SIG, as I've already mentioned, is restarting today, and we're hoping that you'll be a part of that. And there have been historically another 2 as well, and we're certainly looking to reactivate those, and even ask for people to develop their own ideas of how special interest groups, or what kind of special interest groups. We've had some really exciting suggestions, everything from artificial intelligence to policy making, or from an informal level. So we have some really, really good expert ideas coming in there. And so it's all to bring in people from different sectors, as I've got in the diagram there. So, you know, meteorologists, energy and water specialists, policymakers, educators, and all kind of like using their expertise and overlapping themselves and driving things forward. So that's the general aim of the SIGs. So this Education SIG in particular is led by myself. So if I introduce myself, I'm Kit Rackley. I am the Education Programme Officer here at WEMC. I used to be a high school teacher. I was a high school teacher for 13 years. I taught a subject that we call in United Kingdom geography, which I know is taught in kind of different ways in different countries. Like, for example, United States, they split it into other things like earth sciences, social sciences. But basically, it's about how the world works and how it all connects together, both physically and human. I'm also a public speaker and an educationalist. And I do teacher training, and I also help train teachers here at the University of St. Anglia. So I have plenty of experience working with education colleagues and trying to draw out their talents and their offerings to the sector. I also handle the logistics and the organisations of WEMC 6 too. So we also have Lauren de Boer, who's one of our co-founders here at WEMC, but the 2 people at director level who will be more directly involved with the Education SIG will be Sue Ellen Haupt, who can't join us today, but she works at NCAR and is a senior science director of weather systems there. And she takes quite a lot of a directorship lead when it comes to the education side of things. And as you've already heard from Alberto Rackley, who's one of our founding directors and managing director, who's had plenty of experience, as you can see there, leading institutions such as NASA, ECEM WFCCO in Australia. So we're very well led with people in the field and top experts in their own right. So I'd like to kind of like pass the mic over to you if you like. We'll pass the chat box. I mean, we have 2 current attendees been able to. Sebastian, would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, and why you're interested in the Education SIG?
Definitely. So my name is Sebastian Sturl. I work at the Free University of Brussels, doing research on climate services for the renewable energy transition in sub-Saharan Africa. And next to that, I also do things like public speaking, invited presentations, and so on everything related to causes of the climate crisis, consequences of the climate crisis, how to fight the climate crisis, energy, renewable energy, etc., which is just one of my big passions. Well, I more or less just joined this webinar because I saw that that Kit had been starting this group on LinkedIn. Well, it seemed quite interesting to me, so I decided to just join and see if there's any way that I could contribute to this, because it seems to combine my the field that I'm working in with the things that I like doing. So that's basically it.
Thank you, Sebastian. And just as an example of the connections that I mentioned earlier, I'm absolutely delighted that Sebastian will be joining me at our international conference next month to do with how to improve outreach for education and formal education. So I'm very much looking forward to that, Sebastian.
Thanks for inviting me, Kit.
No problem. Andreas, could you give us 30 seconds or so kind of about who you are and why you're here?
Yes, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Andreas Kazantidis. I'm the head of the Laboratory of Atmospheric Physics from the University of Patras, Greece. I'm here because there are 2 or 3 maybe different ways to be here. One is that I'm leading our MSc program on applied meteorology and environmental physics. And since I'm a specialist in energy meteorology, we have a course dedicated to that, trying to do applied meteorology, so real to give the students a real portfolio of models and skills. Secondly, I'm heading the department in Copernicus Academy. So this is a network of institutes that want to, they're interested for Copernicus uptake. And I'm also participating in Erasmus Plus project called EO4Geo. It's actually an educational project. It's about to give the, a sketch of the needs, the technical skills that are needed from different type of Copernicus users in order to really use Copernicus data.
That's fantastic.
So this is 3 different activities: Copernicus Academy, EO4Geo, and our MSc course that bring me here.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Andreas. And there's a project I'll highlight to everybody a bit later on in this chat, which I'm sure that you can be very, very directly related to because it involves Copernicus. So thank you. Right, so moving on, there were some teachers that I was hoping to participate as well. I did schedule this to be during the half-term holiday in the United Kingdom. The good side of that, of course, is that teachers are not at school and they can attend, but of course, the flip side of that is that most of them are probably away on holiday and enjoying time with their families. So, but many of them said they are very interested in listening back to us and being involved. So we can catch up with them at a later date. So with regards to one of the big questions that I got quite a lot from people when setting this up was, what are the commitments to be involved with this SIG? Really, there's only one main commitment and kind of a varying commitment, and that's is to become a WEMC member. But WEMC membership is absolutely free, and it just really serves the purpose of logistics. So becoming a WEMC member means you've consented for us to have your details so we can contact you, and we can put you in contact with other people that we may need to network with. So there are other benefits of being a WEMC member. So from our point of view, it's a win-win. And as I've already mentioned, there's no cost to that at all. So that's I suppose the main expectation, the main commitment in terms of what you need to do to become a SIG member. Apart from that, it's very, very low expectations. We strongly recommend that if you don't have a LinkedIn account, that you get one. They're quite useful on their own because quite a lot of communications will be done via LinkedIn, via our WEMC Education SIG group. It's not to worry if you steer away from these kind of things and you don't like to join a social media site, even if it's a professional-based social media site, we can work around that. It's not a problem, but it's just to help with logistics again. And in terms of time management, time commitments, it's obviously we do feel that we do need a minimum amount of commitment. So there's consistency, and we have people who are taking part who we know are going to contribute again and make sure that we have the similar people so we can have a train of progress taking place. But we also are very, very much aware that this is not possible, and we all have our own commitments, and many of us will be doing this on top of our full-time jobs and taking up projects on top of those as well. As an ex-high school teacher, I know it's very, very difficult, that you really want to be involved with things like this, but then you can't submit the time. So the way we've kind of stated that is your time commitment is really the minimum for effective contribution that you can really make. So if you can only make a couple of conference calls or two just to give your ideas and your insight, or to feedback and say, I tried this with my students, or we did this, or I did this, that's very, very valuable. And we would very much welcome that. Some people can even make, some people may even make this part of their role. So, and will make being part of this SIG an integral part of what they do in their job. So we do have people in other SIGs or in other projects where it is actually part of their role. So they might even attend every conference, every web conference, every meeting, every project, be involved in everything. So anything on this spectrum really is an acceptable time commitment. So my personal opinion is go for it anyway and see how you get on. We'll come a bit in the next slide, I think, which tells you about there's no contractual obligations or anything like that. So we're not expecting, there will be no whip cracking, shall we say. We do want to proceed as a team, as a group, and as a co-consenting group. So, which kind of brings me on to the next slide. So my expectations really as the lead is consent based. We don't do anything unless anybody's happy. So we would expect that you intend to participate in team meetings, but if you can't make it, there'll always be opportunities where you can't, or occasions where you can't. Then we can just follow up at another time, and we can talk about what went on and any actions that are taking place. And speaking about actions, no actions will be agreed on the behalf of anybody if they're not present or if they have not consented to those actions. So if an action is generated, it will be with the consent of everybody present, unless you gave prior consent. So you're already working on something and you've already spoken to me or a co-lead and you think, no, I'm still going to do that, Kit, or we'll still do that, or we'll arrange that. That's the only time we may agree something on your absence, when we're co-working together. And the same goes with meeting deadlines. So of course, deadlines will be agreed and everyone will be on board and they'll know what their task is and what they're doing. So that would be another expectation, but it's been pre-agreed and consented to as well. And as I mentioned, there's no contractual agreement. We don't draw up a contract or anything with this SIG, but I'm hoping that we become so successful and so effective that we may even be involved in maybe contracts or proposals or anything like that where we might be part of a contract. But the policy that we're going to take is it will be opt-in. So if you don't want to be contractually bound to anything, then you can quite simply say, this is not what I'm in here for, so I'll pull out of this one, but I'd still like to be involved with the other things. That is absolutely fine too. And the same with the last one. You can leave the SIG at any time. It's you know, we're meant to be people supporting other people, so I don't want to feel anyone like they're being coerced into anything at all. The only thing that we probably will ask is that if you do feel that it's not for you or you can't commit anymore, if you can just help us out finding a suitable replacement if we don't already have one. So it may even be just finding out, oh, I've got a colleague in my department or another school or in my organization who's willing to take over. You know, that's very, very helpful. So you can see how we kind of want to be a nice, friendly, kind of supportive group, and we're not binding anybody to anything at all. And for teachers who are watching this, I would like to give some personal reassurances based on my experience as a teacher, is that I know that this can be fantastic, and I know I wanted to be involved in so many projects and I just didn't have the chance. And when it came down to it, I just had to email people and say, I'm really sorry, I know I wanted to be involved, but I just can't do it. I know this is not exclusive to teachers, so but I'm just speaking from my experience here. So there are things here that I've put on the screen that you could be involved in, and if you can be involved in just one of these things, you know, that in itself is exceptionally helpful. There's a project that we're kicking off right now, which I'll come to in a bit later. And one of these things in this project would be so useful for your assistants. What I would like to say, however, is I very much believe that participating in something like this can be very good for your professional development. So I would be very happy, from my capacity and my experience. I used to be an associate mentor and associate tutor here at the University of East Anglia for the teacher training course. So I'm very experienced with how to support people with their professional development. So if you can negotiate with line managers, senior leadership team at your school, to make what you do with the WEMC Education SIG as part of your professional development or part of your appraisal, I would be very happy to support you with that. So provide you with supporting documents or be a referee or anything like that. So don't hesitate to get in contact with me if you feel that would be a very helpful way of getting you involved. Okay, so before I move on, does anybody have any questions at all with regards to commitments and expectations? Okay, fantastic. Of course, if there's any questions at a later date, you're very welcome to leave them at the end, or you can email them to me, because I can give you my contact details at the very end. So we have 4 kind of loose aims for the Education SIG. I say loose because you'll notice that by looking at these 4 on the screen, they don't particularly have any specific targets in terms of time, in terms of how they may be achieved. So I'm calling these at the moment more aspirational aims. It's going to be the team members. So when we gather a team together and everybody's on board, one of the first things that we're going to do is establish which ones of these we will aim for and how we might approach them and what the outcomes may look like. So they're, in a sense, these are kind of deliberately vague, but these are things that we kind of do want to work towards. These aims have been generated by myself and some of my colleagues here at WEMC, and some of the partnerships that we already have that have been doing kind of Education SIG type work already, that the things that they have been trying to attempt to do and that they'd like to continue pursuing forward. You will notice that A4 there is in a different color. That is because we are already going ahead with this one, and I would love for the Education SIG to be involved with it. The other three, so A1 to draw up a global syllabus, A2 research into needs, and A3 a conduit and connector for educators to work together. These are things that we can opt for and we can try and achieve at a level of depth that we feel is both achievable and prioritize those things at all. We may even not choose to look at those until a further date. This is all going to be explained in the next steps a bit later on. So at this stage, I mean, I understand that we don't have as many people here live, which is okay. So if anybody has any thoughts, if they're watching this afterwards or recording, I'm very, very happy to have some thoughts be emailed to me. But if anybody here is attending, would like to think if any of these are unrealistic or should be prioritized, one or the other, then I'd be very, very happy for you to let us know. So Laurent and Alberto, from a kind of a director's point of view, who has the experience of what you feel may be achievable or with WEMC's connections, do you feel that these, apart from A4, because we already know we're going ahead with that, do you think there's anything here which we could think might need a rethink, or would be very, very interesting, or would be very aspirational? I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, of course, A4 is quite known to me because I'm taking part in that. But I would say, yeah, the three other fields are, to me, very relevant. I would say that the feedback should come primarily from teachers, I guess, because they are probably the most impacted people and those who know the more those questions. But yeah, to me, all those three fields are interesting. And of course, I think the activities of the SIG should address one or all of these topics, depending on the people who are involved and who are interested in developing them.
Okay, thank you, Laurent. Any other thoughts?
Who exactly is meant by educators in this context? Is that high school teachers, for example, in particular, or is it literally anyone who does any kind of whatever workshop giving, capacity building, no matter what, in the energy meteorology sector, to whichever audience?
Yes, and to elaborate, I think that's a very, very good point, Sebastian. A very good question. Just to elaborate, people who are probably watching the recording, about maybe what Sebastian means here is that when it comes to what WEMC are doing, educators can be people who provide training. So, for example, at the upcoming ECEM conference, we have a pre-conference where meteorological experts can demonstrate, show, and train their energy counterparts about the kind of data they produce, how they could use it for energy, and vice versa. So energy experts can tell their meteorology counterparts kind of the way things they would like package, whatever, etc., etc. So we can mean educators in that respect. So educators at an industry level. Of course, educators, the first thing that people comes to mind, as Sebastian already said, is high school teachers, people who train teachers like myself. So it is a really, really broad term. And to go back to answer your question, Sebastian, I would say this would be something that the team members, when we get started, would probably best come up with a definition of what we mean by educators. And if we come up with a definition of what we mean by educators, then we can therefore assign, maybe we can assign subgroups to these educators in order to assign those to the aims, any particular aim. So I think that's a very, very good clarifying question that you've asked there.
Okay, thanks.
So do we have any other questions regards to aims? Okay. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time now just focus on aim 4, because as I've already mentioned, aim 4, which is to assist and advise in the development of resources, application tools, we've already started this one. Because the Education SIG is just restarting now, we're not yet engaged. We won't be engaged, I say, until we have a team behind us, until we have an actual group who can make moves. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background to say what work has been done so far, and then where the Education SIG may come into this. So WEMC worked with Copernicus, which is underneath the guidance of underneath the umbrella of ECEM WF, to develop what's called the European Climatic Energy Mixes, or ECEM Demonstrator. And this is an online tool which you're very, very welcome to navigate in your own time with the web link there, which is an online tool for people in the sector to go and explore different climate variables and different energy variables. So on the left there, you can see there's a menu which you can choose between different variables or different time series or different or different plots, so projections or historical data, and you can plot these on prints, and you can plot these on a graph, and you can see how trends may change, you can see how the projections may change, and you can download the data. So this wasn't designed for educators in terms of formal educators, so high school, tertiary educators kind of level. This wasn't designed with them in mind. So what I did was I kind of made an education package, like retrofitting kind of how this could be used in a school setting. And this, what you see here, is one of the pages from this education pack showing the different parts of the ECEM demonstrator and what it would mean in terms of using with an educational setting. So you could use this function to make this plot, or this map, or this function on the map to generate this, and this is how it could be used in an educational setting. So taking that, we had a little review period where I demonstrated this to teachers here in Norfolk, and took it to a high school as well in Norfolk, to some year 10 students who are 14, 15-year-olds, and they had to play around with the demonstrator. We used, I created a lesson plan, so we had a structure of learning, we had learning objectives, which was all about climate change and how we know climate change is happening, and how we can use data to predict what might happen in the future. So this was all using the ECEM demonstrator. And we asked both the students and teachers also in a different network about how they thought the ECEM demonstrator was useful in an educational setting. And you can see some of the responses here. I'm not going to go through this in any detail, because the purpose of what I'm doing here is just to tell you the kind of process that we've been taking place and how the SIG may take over or help with this. But you can see how we're using something developed for industry and how we may translate that into an education setting. The other thing we asked as well was to go to policy advisors. So those of you who are familiar with the group, there's a group called the Geographical Association here in the United Kingdom, who are very, very active in getting teachers and experts together to help advise policy and help teachers to develop resources and materials. So with their information and communication technology SIG and another group of teachers from here in Norfolk, I actually got them to give me positives about the ECEM demonstrator, some things they thought weren't so useful to use with high school students, and in blue some suggestions for improvements, which were very enlightening. And this brings me on to the next step, which is we are going to actually take all these comments and we're going to develop a brand new educational tool in order to display climate and eventually energy data too. And this is where the Education SIG will be very, very useful, because they can help in this development. So we have a visual mock-up here. It may not look anything like this. For those of you who are aware of how concepts and wireframes work, it's just purely to give a developer an idea about how something might work visually, and the map might look quite different, the functionality might look different, but at least they know the nuts and bolts and how it should come across together. So as a result of all that feedback that you just saw on the previous slides, working with teachers, working with people who have really good input with these kind of things, this is like the first idea that we've come up with this new application, which we're calling the C3S, which is the Copernicus Climate Change Service Education Demo. And this is something that I really would like the Education SIG to be a part of, to really drive this forward. Here's just a little diagram just to show where the Education SIG will fit in this process. So we have developers. We ourselves are kind of part developers here because we deal with a lot of the data exchange between the Copernicus system and then the front end, which is what people use. And the Education SIG there will sit in that expert stroke end user kind of bracket. So because I'm hoping that the experts, of course, will be educators, what would work as an educator tool, the climate experts, the energy experts who have a desire of what should be displayed or how it could be displayed, and of course end users being the teachers and educators themselves. So this is something we're really excited about here at WEMC, and it will be absolutely wonderful to have the Education SIG involved with this, because we will be a real connected group with a global kind of mentality, because people are coming from around the world, around Europe, from all their different backgrounds. But I just want to welcome two people who have joined us midway through. So thank you for attending. So I'm going to see if perhaps one or both are able to contribute. So Alan, is your mic working? I'm just going to pause the
ground level, if that makes any sense. So I'm interested in the education aspect, and we've got a huge bridge to breach in South Africa, and I'm very interested in anything to do with energy, anything to do with climate, anything to do with change taking a longer term horizon, because that's the opportunity.
Fantastic, thank you, and it's absolutely wonderful you can join us. The other aim that I was very, very keen on was aspiration number 1, which was this whole idea of a global syllabus. I feel that there is a need for this, and speaking to my colleagues, especially in education, we feel that the time is really right for this kind of thing. So there is a definition there from UNESCO about the major importance of climate, and by extension energy education, especially at high school and young people level. You know, anecdotally, well, we don't need to know anecdotally, we see it ourselves, don't we, on the news, that no matter where, all over the world, that both politically and grassroots, there is a huge mentality change with regards to education and climate change. From an ex-high school teacher's point of view, I've been absolutely thrilled and delighted to hear that students are finding a voice in this thing, and that this has become a global movement thanks to the likes of Greta Thunberg, and it's something that's really, really brought this whole issue into not just the public domain, but from every level, from bottom up to top down. And when I did a little bit of research with regards to policies with climate change education, with energy education, I found it was very, very inconsistent, not just on a country scale, so on a national curriculum scale, but also within regions in places like in, for example, United States of America, they have 2 or 3 different science standards. They have the NGSS kind of new science standards, which they're really thrusting forward in places like California, but in other states, they don't want to touch things like climate change in their curriculum, and these are some barriers that we may face, which I'll come to in a second. But I think that there is a need for these kind of things here, for fairness and for make sure we've got balance here. We see there's a lot of articles here in the United Kingdom about climate change must be made a compulsory element in education. There's a little bit of misreporting about this. It kind of sort of, I'd say it's more accurate to say it kind of sort of is compulsory in a way, is that school children here in the United Kingdom take geography as a subject until the age of 14, then they can opt for it onwards. And geography syllabus almost always include an element of climate change. So it's probably more accurate to say it's not as overt and explicitly taught as it probably should be. So some schools will do it a lot more than other schools. So it's more there's a lack of consistency about the depth of climate changes taught the schools in the United Kingdom. But I know from speaking to colleagues across Europe and across the world that it's in some places it's not even touched upon, which is very, very unfortunate. So that does move me on to these slides here. So the benefits and opportunities of having the Education SIG looking into developing a global syllabus. So it could be a catalyst to steer policy for a consistent approach to a global issue. We all know that the climate breakdown is a global issue. There's no, the atmosphere doesn't stop at borders, and the consequences that take place, of course, cross borders too, with increased migration or sea level, whatever it is. We know it's a global issue, and to be a consistent approach to steer policy would be very, very helpful. The SIG will be made of plenty of experts in different levels and different guises. So energy experts, climate experts, education experts, and as you can prove, because we have Gwyn here from South Africa, we have Sebastian from Belgium. We have a global outreach here, and WEMC can facilitate that. So we can use this in order to use our connections, as it says there, and get people's cultural and contextual inputs as well to say things like, well, that's a great idea, Kit, but that might not work down here in South Africa, or in South Africa, we may have to approach it this way. So we've got to make sure. So we've got that ability to do that. And it links in with Sustainable Development Goals, which almost every single country has signed up to through the UN charters. So particularly 4, which is quality education, 13, climate, dealing with climate change, and 17, which is the glue that holds all the other goals together, which is the partnership for the goals. So what we could do as an education SIG can most certainly help facilitate those 4 goals, and that could be a way into getting support from people in the United Nations and their under their umbrella to kind of support us with that work. As I mentioned, there will be drawbacks and barriers. The first thing I found out upon the research, and from my limited knowledge of going to other countries to teach, and limited experience going to touch to teach, but from what I've read and heard from other people, is that cultural contextual differences are a big problem when it comes to trying to give a very consistent message. And of course, we don't need to say it's doesn't need to be said, but of course political differences as well. And I gave the example that even in the United States of America, from state to state, these 3 things, especially political differences, can be a huge barrier to giving a consistent and an accurate message across, or guidance across. Whereas some people will embrace it with open arms, other people may even see it as foreign influence and interfering. And so these are barriers that we have to discuss and see how they can be overcome. In that respect, it is highly ambitious, but I would not put this as a potential goal if I didn't think it was possible. And we have technological and access barriers, of course, simply. So if we have to be mindful of whatever we choose to put in a global syllabus, that it can be accessed at all technological and accessibility levels. So it won't be without its challenges, but if we can crack this thing, then I think the benefits are really, really huge. Before moving on, I'd like to kind of open the floor, kind of what a global syllabus might look like. I mean, I'm not obviously looking to have deep discussion right now, but maybe someone has an idea on the top of their head. Should this global syllabus attempt to influence formal educational policy, or should it be a passive tool and a resource where we do our best to encourage and promote its use? So if anybody has any thoughts, that'd be absolutely wonderful. Hello, Alan. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So firstly, just to say hi to everyone. As Kit knows, I'm a geography teacher here in the UK. I work in primary and secondary. I've also worked with the Geographical Association, and my particular area of interest is curriculum design. So teachers taking something and making the curriculum with the students in the classroom. And there's a lot of industry tools which I've tried to use over the years and think about how those could be used in a classroom situation. So, the demonstrator that you showed earlier is a perfect example of that, where you yourself took something which wasn't designed for teachers and provided the support and the context for teachers to see that it had an educational value. I have been involved in a lot of Erasmus projects, and these are essentially funding from the European Union to allow teachers to communicate with each other across Europe. And so all of these projects involve outcomes that are curriculum outcomes. And one of the challenges is if you're designing some materials on a particular topic, that, for example, in the last project we did, we had a Romanian school, and in Romania, the topic we wanted to perhaps put in year 7 wasn't introduced until year 9, so in other words, later in the curriculum. And there was actually very little flexibility about that. They just simply didn't talk about that until year 9. Whereas in the UK, there's perhaps that greater degree of flexibility. So one issue might be about the complexity of materials and when they're introduced. So it may be that curriculum materials need to be differentiated so that there's different access points at different ages. And also, I think there's an important thing not to think that just because it's complicated that we shouldn't be ambitious about using it, because the RGS, for example, the Royal Geographical Society, I've worked with them on a number of projects working with PhD researchers to essentially translate their materials into a secondary classroom. So the ideas that they're developing are obviously at a much higher level, but underlying it are issues which school students can access if they're, again, scaffolded in a particular way. And the final thing to say is the current project I'm working on with the South Georgia Heritage Trust, who similarly have huge amounts of data and resources linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, but particularly also about climate change, where they are asking me to take the work they've been doing over the last 10, 15 years and introduce people to what they are doing to eradicate rodents, to get rid of these invasive species. And the reason they had to do it so quickly was that there are glaciers that are melting in South Georgia. And if they were to melt past a certain point, then the rodents would have essentially had access to the rest of the island, and their task would have been made more difficult. So we've got this sort of time-sensitive activity, which is climate change dependent, happening thousands of miles away, and yet for me it's a great example of habitat management, and that school students could use for their exam studies and also lower down. So I'm interested to be involved and look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Anne. That's a really that's a really interesting example. A really good with South Georgia there, and I think I most certainly agree with you, Anne, when you say just because something is challenging and ambitious, it shouldn't be tackled. I mean, that's absolutely the case with the issues that we have with the climate breakdown in itself, and just to see the complexities of it, which actually could be turned into an advantage, like the rodent problem and the melting glaciers. These are all these things that it seems so important that we have to have all these people with all these experience and these experts with knowledge coming together and say we need to, but this could be a way in, this could be a benefit, this could be an opportunity of using our knowledge and our cultural kind of capital to say, well, we could have this global syllabus, but if you're going to deploy it in a place like South Georgia, then this could be a way in, because it's very, very important local issue caused by this global problem. So that's very, very, very good. Thank you very much for that contribution. One suggestion that we had from a colleague of ours, from a partner of ours here at WEMC, was they used to be part of Project Drawdown, and they said that for those of you who don't know what Project Drawdown is, it's this study that was made about how we could actually effectively not just reduce our carbon emissions, but actually draw them down from out of the atmosphere. And you may have seen this TED talk online by Chad Frischman about what Project Drawdown is and how it works, and kind of given some examples of what is already happening in terms of drawdown and the kind of impact that drawdown solutions may have. And they have a book released as well, which is a New York Times bestseller. So and it's very, very accessible and very readable. And one of the suggestions from our colleague is it could form the basis for a syllabus, because there's a lot of when you flick through the book and you look through the solutions, there's almost not a corner of the world that's not mentioned or not impacted or not using this, that is not being given as an example. So this is a really good thing, which could be a centerpiece. So if I had more time, I'd kind of give you some examples of how I think that might work. But what I will say is that I'm absolutely delighted that I will actually be speaking to Chad personally next month as he comes to Denmark for our international conference, and so it'll be interesting to see his thoughts. So obviously with WEMC, the E stands for energy. So of course we're particularly interested in energy, and if you list all of the drawdown solutions by energy, which they listed as electricity generation, then you'll see that there are substantial number of solutions there. Some, the second biggest solution, wind turbines onshore. The things which I don't have listed here are other things like energy efficiency, and which could also be touched upon. But with regards to the remit of WEMC, even just looking at just energy still gives a lot of scope. But as Gwen mentioned a bit earlier, with terms of farming, farming and land use and food is a major part of this project drawdown research and the potential solutions to draw carbon out of the atmosphere. And I can allow you to look at the drawdown website yourself. But the point is here, in terms of maybe as a global syllabus, is that because many of these solutions are very applicable no matter what the landscape, urban or rural, and they can be applied at almost all income levels across the globe, that this is globally applicable. So when the Education SIG gets full throttle up and running with its members, this will be discussed as a potential pivot point, shall I say, to generate a global syllabus, or after a little bit of analysis and a little bit of looking into it in some depth, we may feel this was a great idea, but we could have it as part of the global syllabus, but maybe not centered around it. So that's just kind of give you a flavor of our thought processes there. So that brings me to the kind of last part of this web chat. So if you've listened to us, if you're here live, or if you've listened to the recording and you're like, this is something I really would like to get involved with, or you'd like to be involved with part of this, maybe the development of educational tools like the Demonstrator is something you're really passionate about, or a global syllabus, or you have an idea which you think would be very good for the Education SIG to make an aim, then please do sign up. As already mentioned before, the only requirement is that you're a WEMC member. It is free to do so, and there are other benefits for membership, but it doesn't bind you to anything at all. It's mostly for logistical and data purposes, so it's easy to coordinate things. But it does put you in contact with all other WEMC members. So if you wanted to liaise with other people, that will facilitate that as well. So the link is there and it's absolutely free. The thing that you must do, of course, is make sure that you check that box that says you're interested in the Education SIG, because come Wednesday the 12th of June, or the couple of days after Wednesday 12th of June, when I'm finalising things and I'm looking down the names of interested parties, I'll be filtering them all out by who's clicked that box. So make sure that you do click that box that says you're interested in the Education SIG there. I know that I can see some names here that will be attending our national conference of energy and meteorology in Denmark at DTU next month. I'm heading an Education SIG workshop on the Wednesday. So please do come along to that if you're going to come to ECEM. We'll be pretty much expanding on what we've been talking about today. And if you are going to become a WEMC Education SIG member, then your attendance would be very useful. So once this has all been done, we'll be into July, and we will get our team members up and running, and we'll get a good hardy core of us going. And our next steps will be to have a kickoff web conference with our team members. These are just 3 things that we will talk about. These may change a little, or we may add things or things like that. But I'd like to appoint a co-lead. That would be absolutely wonderful to have a right-hand person, partner in crime, so to speak, who can support me with this. We will see what we can do with our aims. Maybe they will be a bit tweaked. Maybe they will reworded a bit, but we'll try to apply some smart approach with this. So being specific and measurable, achievable, realistic, and time related with our aims. That's going to be very, very important if we want to start generating outcomes. And we will start to develop a strategy to support the development of the education demo that you saw a bit earlier. So they were going to be the 3 main aims of the kickoff web conference with team members. So we're actually 1 minute over the scheduled broadcast time, which is not a problem, but I will offer 4 minutes if anybody has any Q&As, anything burning that they would like to ask, or anything that they would like to share.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the wonderful presentation. I would like to say that in terms of developing the global syllabus, I mean, it sounds obviously challenging because you make it sound quite ambitious and everything, but I think a lot of work would have already been done, has already been done, if we just get the right people together. For example, a couple of months ago here in Brussels, we gathered a couple of colleagues, experts in different fields related to climate change, energy, water, etc. And we actually went and drew up not a complete syllabus, but we compiled a book aimed at high school students. With different chapters looking at each of these different issues. I wrote the one on energy, the energy transition, and this is currently at the publishers. So we're hoping it'll be that'll be released well sooner rather than later. Well, I mean, together with things we have like Project Drawdown and national efforts like this one is aimed at students in Belgium, but I'm sure other people have done similar things in their respective countries. I would guess I mean, you're not starting from scratch in any way, huh? I mean, we have to look at what's already there and draw things together in the right kind of way. So that's just what I wanted to contribute. It's a very nice initiative, very important, and yeah, definitely something I can imagine being involved in.
Thank you, Sebastian. Yes, I probably should have stated at the time is that we aren't starting from a blank sheet at all. I mean, we are very, very aware of, especially those of us who have connections in education or as educators ourselves, we are very aware that there is some amazing, fantastic work that's going on out there. And people and agencies and organizations are, already trying to enhance education. So it would be very, very unfair of me not to say that this is not happening or that attempts are not being made. So I think, Sebastian, your point about ensuring we kind of, we look at what's already been done and the attempts that have already been made, and then trying to, rather than making it sound like we're starting from scratch, more of a case of trying to collaborate our efforts. So see who is doing this, who's done some really good stuff like you mentioned with your book, and saying, okay, what can we do? How can we all partner up and make this work? So I think that's a very, very important point that you've made there. So thank you. Any more questions or ideas or comments?
A lot of my focus, and not to be explored now, but just a consideration, the barriers to entry to education in South Africa are extreme. Part of it is our history, where a large number of people were not expected or needed to go to school. There was no requirement that they go to school. And our current education system is pretty poor. So there is a process, and that's where I'll sort of very much come from. We know where we want to go to, and having a global guideline curriculum, if you like, is superb as a longer term objective. The challenge is breaking it down and measuring the starting point. So I would certainly be very interested in participating with that aspect in mind, because we need people to get to the point where they actually appreciate what is involved, and then can you select, if you like, the areas of interest in order that they are willing to contribute and go forward.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a very very good point. Thank you, Gwen. So I was lucky that one of the places I have visited was rural South Africa, so just outside of Kruger National Park. And in fact, one of the studies I did, this was when I was an undergraduate, was about the perceptions of risk. And it was very, very clearly established by our study that the education, the level of education that people had really had a massive impact on their risk perception. And it just goes to show that an access barrier is, particularly when it comes to countries which are lower on the income scale, so level 1, level 2 countries, as I call them, to use Hans Rosling's classification of countries, is an absolute thing we need to bear in mind. And so to go to this slide where I said, should we attempt to influence formal education policy or be a passive tool which encourages use? Maybe the answer to that question is, as you point out, maybe it should be both, a longer term aim to influence,
both.
but
Definitely.
we've got to put in place something for youngsters or people who are not able yet to be engaged in formal education. And I think that's a very, very important and noble goal, I feel. So thank you. Okay, so it's so in terms of time allotted, we're over the time allotted, but we are just under an hour of the time I wanted to spend on this, so it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you all for your contributions. And as I mentioned, if you're watching this as a recording, I would absolutely be delighted to hear your thoughts. And just to go back to this slide here, just to let you know that if you're definitely interested, please do go through it. There's no need to contact me directly unless you have direct questions, which is absolutely fine. I've noticed I failed to put my email address on the website, but you can find my contact details via WEM Council's webpage anyway. So if you sign up for WEMC membership through that link, then I'll have your details on file, and then I'll be in contact with how we can move on forward. Okay. If you are able to share this, so Alan, thank you, who's offered to share this recording in his networks. If you are able to share this among people who may be interested, that'd be absolutely fantastic. So and spread the word of what we're trying to achieve here. So thank you very much. I've been delighted that you can join me or listen in, and I very, very much hope and look forward to working with you all. So thank you very much.